Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. This came from a UConn account. Funny, because we just did Caravan. And the question was, do you think we land Thomas and AJ? Okay. And the context here is pretty straightforward. So on our Torres on UConn page, we put up a tweet a few days ago, basically talking about the first weekend in which coaches were allowed on the recruiting circuit. And so Dan Hurley, I mean, everybody was out. You know, Mark Pope, Dan Hurley, John Calipari, Bill Self. I mean, you go on and on down the list, Scott Drew, Mark Few, whatever. And so one thing that our UConn account noticed was that Dan Hurley appears to be big game hunting. He and his staff were at every single game that the number one prospect in America, AJ Dybantsa, was playing in, as well as Malik Thomas, a top 10 guard who they have been on as well. And so the question was, do you think we land both Thomas and AJ? What I'm going to do is kind of what I did in the last question. I'm going to kind of twist it a little bit to kind of talk about what I think is the important conversation here. And that is, let's just have a conversation about AJ Dybantsa, the number one high school player in America in the class of 2025. And again, why this is important is because last weekend was the first weekend that college coaches could be on the road to evaluate high school players this summer. There will obviously be several more open events over the course of the summer. We call them live periods in the biz. Okay. So AJ Dybantsa, who is he? First of all, fascinating story. Remember, it was right around this time last year that he blew up. I mean, he blew up, went to Peach Jam. I believe he was the leading scorer at Peach Jam. And at the time, he was coming off, how about this? His freshman year of high school basketball in the state of Massachusetts. He's from Massachusetts originally. From Brockton, Massachusetts, actually. Fun fact, by the way, Brockton is the home of Marvin Hagler, the home of Rocky Marciano. The high school team is called the Brockton Boxers. I don't think he went to Brockton High School, but Brockton's a cool little town in Massachusetts. And he blew up this time last year. Ends up transferring to Prolific Prep up in Northern California. I've been up there, beautiful campus, etc. And decides last fall that he is going to reclassify, skip his sophomore year. So last year was his junior year, which means he is now going into his senior year this coming fall. And so because of it, the recruiting stuff is really heating up. Now it's interesting. Remember, there is no G League Ignite. I don't think Overtime Elite is really even about, college age players anymore. It's more about developing high school players. And so this kid is going to play college basketball, but it really feels like his recruitment is just getting started. So I'm not going to come on here and this is the favorite and this is that and blah, 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 blah. But I do think it's at least worth talking about. But like I said, I think it's really just the beginning. And I think what makes things a little bit complicated is as follows. From Massachusetts, but plays his high school ball in California. And his father, who is actually a cop, which is kind of interesting in and of itself, his father is kind of handling all the recruitment. AJ even did a couple interviews at the event this weekend in Indianapolis and basically said, like, look, I haven't even worried that much about it. When I reclassified, I told everybody to reach out to my dad. He's been handling it, and we're going to narrow some things down. Now, in terms of where the recruitment stands, like I said, I think it's early. And what's especially interesting is even some of the early leaders have kind of probably fallen by the wayside. Last year, as a junior living in California, he actually visited USC. Remember, though, USC has had a coaching change since then. Andy Enfield is gone. He's at SMU. His staff went with him. Eric Musselman is in. And so I'm not saying Muss can't pull it off. I'm just here to say that I don't believe that, they're certainly playing from behind. So Dybantsa, 6'8", really, really good player. I know sometimes we overhype these high school kids. This kid is really good, though. Like I said, led Peach Jam in scoring as a true freshman a year ago. And what I would say about his recruitment, while it's early, I think there's probably about 5 schools you can pretty much narrow it down to right now. And maybe something changes over the next couple months. But as I said, USC, I don't really see Auburn, I believe he has taken a visit. Bruce Pearl is from Massachusetts originally. I think it's going to come down to one of 5 schools, and I think really one of 4 schools. First one, I do think it's Duke, okay? I do think it's Duke. I'm obviously not pro or anti-Duke, but listen, Duke is a huge brand. Duke right now, especially with kind of Calipari on the way out at Kentucky, they're really the only school right now that's like fully invested in the one and done thing. They're all in on Cooper Flag this year. And listen, that is their brand as of right now. Come here, be elite. We'll get you in, we'll get you out. You'll be a top pick, especially if you're super elite. And what I think is interesting about Dybantsa and all these guys that are kind of coming up now, remember, they kind of really came of age, as Duke kind of became the preeminent one and done school. I was thinking about this. It kind of makes me sad to think about, but, the Zion year, for example. So Zion at Duke would have been 6 years ago by the time AJ Dybantsa graduates. He would have been 12 years old the year that Zion played at Duke, which one makes me sad, but two, it also makes me kind of believe, probably grew up with the Marvin Bagleys, the Zion Williamsons, the Jason Tatums at Duke. And so to me, I think Duke is going to be in position. They're obviously in position for the number 2 player in that class, Cameron Boozer. Cameron Boozer's the son of Carlos Boozer. Carlos Boozer, of course, played at Duke. And so I think that'll probably be the sales pitch. You two coming together, dominate college basketball, maybe be this generation's version of RJ Barrett and Zion Williamson. I think Duke is a factor. I'll tell you, to the original question, I don't think you can count out UConn on anybody that they want at this point. And when I look at UConn, where they are right now in recruiting, that you can't count them out. And the other thing, too, we learned last summer is Dan Hurley goes after everybody full speed ahead. And I think I talked to Tom Moore after the national championship game this year. Tom Moore is Dan Hurley's lead assistant, was also the lead assistant. Well, he's not the lead assistant, but he is an assistant, was also the lead assistant under Jim Calhoun for years. Tom Moore, by the way, has 4 national championship rings, 2 under Hurley, 2 under Calhoun. But one thing he said is one of the similarities that they had was that they're not afraid to swing big in recruiting. And so, one, UConn shouldn't back down to anybody as the 2-time national champion. But 2, remember, they were full speed ahead with Cooper Flag. And everybody said they got no shot at Cooper Flag. They shouldn't even try, whatever. And by all accounts, UConn made it much tougher on Cooper Flag than people anticipated, even though he ended up at Duke. So Dybantsa, he's from Massachusetts. UConn was at all of his games. I don't think UConn would be there if they thought they had no shot. And so my hunch is that eventually, at some point, UConn probably will get a visit. He's from Massachusetts. The other thing, his father, who I referenced, is handling his recruitment, is a cop. So, he's talked on the record about discipline, accountability. Those are the things that matter to his family. Doesn't get much more discipline than playing in the UConn basketball program right now. I think UConn will be a factor. I think 2 that are certainly interesting to me are Arkansas and Kentucky, because you look at Arkansas and you look at Kentucky, 2 completely different things. Arkansas, Calipari, listen, even in the first EYBL session, which was no coaches were allowed, reporters interviewed Dybantsa, and I believe it was Jack Pilgrim. I read all his stuff at KSR, but I believe AJ told Jack Pilgrim something to the effect of like, Cal reached out right away, and Cal let me know, hey, we're not slowing down. I think the paraphrased quote was, this is like when a big time business, moves from one location to the other. It's still the same business. And Calipari was like, I'm not stopping recruiting you just because I'm not at Kentucky. So I'd be curious if Arkansas can get in the mix. To Calipari's credit, and I talked about this on the Natty State Sports Show with John Neighbors, is you look at what Cal has done. Got those 3 kids that he wanted out of Kentucky as far as recruits were concerned: Boogie Flan, Carter Knox, and Billy Richmond. Got Darius Acuff, a 5-star in 2025 on campus. So he is still getting those elite players to campus even as he's left Kentucky. Now, to the credit of Mark Pope, he was on the sidelines for every one of Dybantsa's games this past weekend. And so it's clear that Mark Pope is not backing down. And Dybantsa obviously has a great relationship with the University of Kentucky, or at least he's considered going there. I've said it before. Alvin Brooks is elite. Jason Hart, because of his background with G League Ignite, I don't think he's going to be afraid to recruit the best of the best. And so I think Arkansas would be in the mix. And the other one to at least keep an eye on, I would probably say, is the Alabama Crimson Tide. Preston Murphy, the Alabama coach, or the Alabama lead assistant, I believe, coached AJ Dybantsa's high school or AAU or something a year ago or 2 years ago or whatever. So I believe there is a relationship there. But I'll say this for AJ Dybantsa, man, it's going to be a fascinating recruitment. I think it's early, but if I had to guess, by the way, I still do need a haircut. If I did have to guess, my guess would be that it would be one of those first four schools that I mentioned: Duke, UConn, Kentucky, or Arkansas.